Hi there, I'm Donnie Rust. Welcome to the Lost Executive Podcast, a podcast dedicated to experience-based travel, hospitality, and business. On a previous episode, I touched on the years I spent in Pinetown, a small city in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, where I grew up prior to immigrating with my family to the United Kingdom. Now, Britain is not simply a different country to South Africa, it might as well be a different world, and today I'm looking at some of the cultural differences that I experienced when I moved over. This is based entirely on my own experience and includes my own opinions, and I promise to make every effort to stay on topic. Now, we immigrated in 2003 to Norwich City, a city with an almost identical population to Pinetown, which is something I only found out when I was writing this. Norwich is the capital city of Norfolk County, which lies on the east coast of England. Known for its medieval architecture, cobblestone streets, and vibrant cultural scene, the city offers everything that a larger city like London has, but on a smaller scale. Home to multiple universities and colleges, as well as large businesses in both white and blue-collar industries, there is a diverse mix of generations, cultures, and classes that keeps Norwich brimming with potential. Its population is roughly about 144,000 people. It was founded in the 10th century and is twined with Norwich in Connecticut. And like all cities in England, it is obsessed with football. Norwich City sports the colours yellow and green and are known as the Canaries. The city is impassable during football matches. Trust me, I lived there and it is terrible. Norwich Castle looms over the city from atop its hill and shares the skyline with two cathedrals. The Norwich Cathedral, formerly the Anglican Cathedral Church of the Holy and Undivided Trinity, and the Roman Catholic Cathedral St. John the Baptist, both of which have notable stained glass collections and are fine examples of medieval architecture. The Norwich Cathedral's original style was Norman Romanesque and was built between 1096 and 1145. Norwich Cathedral is a masterpiece of Norman architecture. Its robust rounded arches, massive columns and decorative stonework exemplify the Romanesque style brought to England by the Normans. There are Gothic additions from the 14th century which were introduced, particularly with the addition of flying buttresses, pointed arches, and the elegant perpendicular style cloisters. The spire, which was completed in the 15th century, is the second tallest in England, as a fine example of Gothic design. Meanwhile, the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, which is a Roman Catholic cathedral, is built in the Gothic Revival style. It was built between the years 1882 and 1910, and this cathedral showcases the Victorian Gothic Revival style, which is influenced by English Gothic traditions. Designed by George Gilbert Scott Jr., its intricate stone carving, large stained glass windows, and ribbed vaults reflect the medieval Gothic aesthetic, but with modern Victorian craftsmanship. Both cathedrals illustrate the architectural evolution of sacred spaces in Norwich, moving from the robust and monumental Norman design to the intricate and soaring Gothic style. With later influences in the Gothic Revival, their preservation provides a glimpse into the city's rich religious and cultural heritage. Now, with many buildings being protected, many areas still look the same today as they did hundreds of years ago, with much of the city's history poking through the blanketed modernity. It was the first city that I lived in after leaving South Africa, and compared to Pinetown and Durban, Norwich was what I would define as a sleepy town. The towering skyscrapers of eThekwini were replaced with staunch, stout buildings in an undefinable age. Castle walls and medieval architecture, all far older than the country of my birth, made me feel like I was walking through thousands of years of stories. The wide, busy roads that were hot enough to fry an egg and populated by sputtering, polluting, dangerously hot vehicles with angry, gun-touting drivers were replaced by polite and cooperative Citroën and Volvos, seemingly lost in a Kafkaesque one-way system that promised to keep them in the city forever. Instead of seatbelt buckles and steering wheels hot enough to melt the skin, there were car heaters, ice scrapers, and de-icers. The robots were replaced with traffic lights, with an extra amber light between red and green, introduced seemingly just for our comfort. For the many South Africans who made the journey to the UK in the late 90s and early noughties, the following interactions will probably sound familiar. 1. Waiting at the petrol station for a staff member to come out and handle the pump, check your tyres and oil, and give your windshield a courteous wipe down. 2. Learning very quickly that they don't do that here. 3. Not being able to slice your own bread in the shop, but being able to buy alcohol with your cereal. 4. the excited nervousness of using a public service bus, train or tram. 5. Learning what the fuck a tram is. 6. The inevitably hurried and profoundly apologetic attempt to explain that in South Africa we have whites, blacks, Indians and Cape Coloreds, who are a diverse group of people with mixed ethnicities and cultures, and that when you referred to a person as being coloured, you weren't being racist, but just thought that calling someone mixed race was reductive. 7. Navigating a British HR meeting. Not to throw dispersion about British people, but it has to be said that when you live in a first world country whose history has been mainly about reaching out and rattling other countries until their good bits fall out, you tend to have a simpleton's view of the world. For example, many South Africans who visit UK will recognise the following conversation when you tell someone that you're South African, and the response is, "But you're white." Things may have changed in 2025, but in 2003, prior to the rise of global connectivity, people really had a blanket assumptions about the world. I did not help the situation. I remember the first time someone from work seemed perplexed that I was a white boy who lived in South Africa. I acted defensive and said, "I'm not white." "Yes, you are," they argued. "You're as white as newly fallen snow. I can see the colour of your veins. If you stand in front of a light, I'll see your heart and lungs." I explained that being British, they were not accustomed to the type of sunshine we experienced in South Africa. Patting them understandably on the shoulder, I asked, "What happens when you spend a lot of time out in the sun?" "I tan," they said. "And what colour do you go when you tan?" I asked. "I go brown," they answered. "And when you stop going into the sun, what happens?" "Well, my tan fades." "And I get pale?" "Exactly," I explained. "In South Africa, I was black because I was very tan, and in Britain, I am white." "Oh," they said, "that makes so much sense." And then they went to tell everyone else. I really did spend a lot of time in the HR office at my first job. If you're listening, hi Glenda. And South Africans are just as ignorant of Britain, really. In 2003, I genuinely expected all Scottish people to sound like Sean Connery and every English person to speak like Shere Khan. This is not the case. There's a wondrous and complex diversity of language in the UK that has to be experienced to be appreciated. For the majority of the population, it is technically English, however, it just appears to be encoded. Saffas are also woefully unprepared for the cold. East Anglia, which includes Norfolk, Suffolk and Cambridgeshire, was once swampy marshlands called the Fens, which were drained in the 17th and 19th centuries to form farmlands. But this hasn't changed the weather. The land yearns to be a swamp and will turn to bog the first chance it has. This, combined with Britain's high humidity, which in turn is caused by the proximity to the ocean, the Gulf Stream and the prevailing winds from the mainland, means that the country is not just cold, it is highly humid cold. It's the kind of cold that gets into your bones and won't leave you alone. Remember those days in South Africa where it was so humid you felt you were walking around with a hot towel under your shirt? Imagine that exact opposite. I'd never seen frost, let alone snow. I had no idea what black ice was, apart from something else that would get me into the HR office. And did that truck just spray my car with pebbles? Alright, that's just grit. Oh, and I'd never known shrinkage like I did when I first arrived. It may sound funny, but it was terrifying, and for a moment I genuinely wondered if it was going to go back to the normal size. I cannot be alone in that experience. And like our cousin Barry Hilton famously said, there's not so much violent crime in Britain, because it's very hard to shoot somebody if you're wearing mittens. And the food. I miss the food. The food is something that South Africans and the British just can't seem to see eye to eye on. Every South African knows the conversation of having to explain what a bunny chow is, and that yes, they are delicious, but no, you should not Google image it. The best explanation so far that I've been able to use is to describe it as a Cornish pasty, which was a staple food for Cornish tin miners. Just, it's not a pasty, it is a loaf of bread with the inside torn out, and instead of stewed meat and vegetables, it's curry. Lots of curry. Also, you wouldn't want to be inside a mine eating it, as there aren't any windows. Or, explain to a Brit what a biltong shop looks like without them thinking we're all savages. They scoff at us having pineapple on our pizzas, but actually enjoy chocolate orange. They don't stock proper Fanta grape. They don't know what Ghost Pops are, and what the hell is up with their iron brew? PS chocolates here? Not a thing. Lunch bars? Never heard of them, which broke my heart when I came to Scotland. Think you could get a bag of biltong by the kilogram? No chance. Babuti, Boerewors, Boikikos, Pappensus? I don't think I've worked out why I do think I've worked out why the food in Britain is so shit compared to the smorgasbord of delight South African menus provide. South Africa is the nipple of Africa, and for most of its history, other countries have tried to suck that teat dry. This has created displacement for native people and an influx of foreign influences. People always bring their cultures with them, and culture equals food. There are 12 official languages in South Africa, even more if you include the slang and the local dialects, so this gives you an idea of the number of different influences. Durban at one point had a high population of Indians outside of India than anywhere else in the world. There were multiple European colonies set up during the last 100 years, and all these cultures combined to create not only the kind of menus available, but palates that are programmed to be adventurous. Also, considering the available local resources in South Africa, the food and game were available, and our love of meat is really supported. And when you have a lot of meat and a lot of different cultures preparing it, you end up with an endless variety of ways to make vegans and vegetarians hate you. Also, during the 90s, South Africa was redefining itself as a multicultural rainbow nation after a massive political change. So my generation actively sought out new foods to try as the fastest way to integrate ourselves into this new and exciting idea. Conversely, Britain is an old country that believes that its ability to endure is its greatest asset. Its consistency is important. Everything is consistent. You want meat? Here's a consistently cut steak or chop. Here are some sausages for you, all consistent and nice. You want foreign cuisine? Here are some aisles in the shop with consistently selected packages of products produced for you by consistent suppliers. The taste may be great, but in South Africa you just get more, and this is commonly felt throughout Europe. In the noughties, the opinion of the rest of Europe was that things in Britain are stiff upper lip and rationed, like it was after the Great War. In the noughties, Britain was so consistent it was like the tides. Now, this is a broad stroke explanation, and there are exceptions. But when you finally find a Spur steakhouse in Britain and get served a single steak with no chips or coleslaw on it, you want to walk into the kitchen and blixen the chief. Did I say chief? I meant chef. Habitats is another difference. Britain's population in 2023 was 68.3 million. South Africa's at the same time was 60.4 million. There are more people living in Britain than in South Africa, but the island is 5 times smaller, and the difference in weather means that people living here spend most of the time indoors. Even those people who have private gardens do not spend as much time in them because of the weather. Compared to South Africa, where the accommodation can range from homes with gardens and pools, to inner-city apartments, to dwellings with a road sign as a roof, everyone nevertheless has the benefit of enjoying the weather. There just seems to be more breathing space in South Africa. Britain, however, always feels like whatever you're doing, you have to do it around someone else. Of course, you're going to have an issue with some foreign Safford Bryan his lamb shake in the communal garden if all it does is set off your smoke detectors. And this is not a criticism, just an observation, and it took some time to get used to. As I'm sure many other South Africans coming to the UK possibly felt the same way. Without saying, though, the biggest difference has to be the security. And my opinion on this particular matter used to be that it was due to the level of personal security one feels. My thinking was that Britain, with its benefit system and its National Health Service, created a baseline level of security for the individual that meant that if someone stole, it was primarily out of a desire for profit or reputation. I thought that in South Africa, a great number of people committed crimes because they were just desperate. However, this only goes so far in explaining the issue of security because theft is not the biggest issue in South Africa. Political changes and challenges have created a country where most are doing their best, but many are just taking advantage. The government and police force are unable to curtail this because they are mismanaged, undertrained, and not trusted. Criminals commit crimes, and many are caught, but the majority of these people are not imprisoned. Most are booked and released. However, criminal records make getting through a recruitment DBS check difficult. It means no job, and what else? What else are there to do? This outlines a behavior pattern for them to follow. It's simply the act of taking advantage becomes far easier than making a difference. Taking advantage of people's property leads to taking advantage of people, and then leads to even worse. I forgot it if I'm speaking about South Africa or the United Kingdom there. Sorry. I think that the main difference in security between UK and SA includes 2 main elements. One, there's always less crime in frigid climates, for the simple reason that criminals are opportunists and mittens make crime difficult. And secondly, that South Africa simply started their political upheaval some decades ahead of the UK, and that the UK is heading into a situation that will be as disruptive to the norm as the 1994 election in SA was. But I'm not hating on the UK any more than I could hate on South Africa. If you love a place, you should love it enough to be honest about it. So, what made Britain a great place to live in comparison? Well, for as messy and convoluted as the British government may be, when it comes to things, it has nothing on standing in line at the Home Affairs Office. Those things were hellish. Standing at the back of the line that loops around the street for hours in the baking, unrelenting sun, waiting to get into the relative shade of the office, which was hotter than the outside, finally getting to the counter and speaking to some overworked, underpaid clerk, only to be told that you needed to join the other line. Every Safa did it. We threw our toys out of the cot. We stormed out of that office, doing the angry walk of a South African going to sort this cuck out once and for all. Storming down the road, around the corner, up the hill to join the back of the line we were supposed to be in the first place. In Britain, that side of things may not be a well-oiled machine, but at least it has its important parts and is still running. It is formed around people who cannot stand outside in line, and mostly can be done over the phone or online. Also, let's not forget that Britain is a country that has shaped much of the world. Like all great nations, it has demonstrated that the road to hell may indeed be lined with good intentions. But this is the point. Britain has always approached its world domination with good intentions. The country may have a complicated political approach, but it has improved the world through innovation, industrialization, and the abolition of slavery. It is an old country that does its best to keep up with modern ways of thinking and modern politics. It doesn't always get it right, but it does do its best to not go off-road. Britain has, after all, for centuries, been the anchor of the Western world. And of course, one of the best things about living in Britain are the South Africans. There are enough South Africans in every city that it's never difficult to meet and form connections. You can find them on social media, you can find them at any and all rugby events that have the Springboks or the cricket if the Proteas are playing. It is a very welcome taste of home to be surrounded by a load of Safas singing Shozaloza at a television screen with the terrified locals huddled in the corner. And as a proud Pintonian and Durbanite, multiculturalism comes naturally to me. In our daily lives growing up, we were fortunate and privileged enough to be exposed to a range of cultures and perspectives. Britain offered a springboard not only to the heaps of perspectives and cultures within their own island, but also those in Europe and abroad. Thanks to living in Britain, I was able to explore the whole of Europe and expand my own personal lens of the world. Thanks to Britain, travelling has become far easier. And finally, the last thing to speak about is returning home. Recently, I was very proud to be able to speak on the podcast The Return to Support, where we spoke about the difficulties people have returning to their home after travelling for long periods, and it helped me realize something. I've learned that our concept of home is a sense of permanence. Home is a place that shouldn't change. It is a place that when you go back to, everything should stay the same. Learning that this isn't the case is when we grow as people and enter adulthood, because childhood is only knowing about abundance. Since 2003, I've lived in Britain the most. I've been able to travel a lot, but I travel on a British passport. My mail gets sent to a British address. My company is registered in Britain. I've lived in this hemisphere, if not this country, for longer than I've lived in South Africa. But whenever I go back, be it for business or pleasure, I'm always finding those good things first. Those things do not change. Thank you for listening.